Jake Morrison adjusted his blue diplomatic uniform one last time before stepping into the largest room he had ever seen. The chamber stretched out before him like a massive arena, but instead of seats for people, there were platforms designed for creatures he could barely understand. Some platforms held beings made of what looked like living crystal that sparkled with their own light. Others supported insect-like creatures the size of cars, their many eyes watching his every move. In the center of the room, floating in glass tanks, were beings that looked like colored clouds with faces. The human ambassador had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. Earth had finally been invited to join the Galactic Council, a group of alien species that had been working together for thousands of years. This was humanity's chance to prove they belonged among the stars with all these advanced civilizations. Captain Lisa Harper watched from a viewing window high above the main floor. She commanded the UES Explorer, the ship that had brought the human delegation to this meeting. Her hands pressed against the glass as she looked down at her people standing in the middle of all those alien beings. Lisa had fought in 3 wars on Earth, but nothing had prepared her for the nervousness she felt watching this peaceful meeting. "Ambassador Morrison looks ready," said Commander Rick Taylor, standing beside her. Rick was head of security for the mission, a tall man with gray hair who had served in Earth's military for 20 years. His job was to keep everyone safe, but there was not much he could do if things went wrong in a room full of aliens who could probably destroy their ship. With a thought, Dr. Amy Collins stood on the other side of Captain Harper, taking notes on a small computer. Amy was Earth's best expert on alien life, and she was trying to document every species she could see. "Look at the size of those crystal beings," she whispered. "They must be at least 20 feet tall. And those insect creatures have to weigh as much as our shuttlecraft." Down in the main chamber, Jake Morrison felt very small. The aliens around him could probably step on him without noticing, but he kept his back straight and his voice confident. He had been chosen for this job because he was good at talking to difficult people, and he had spent years learning about each species in the Galactic Council. The crystal beings were called Zephyrians, and they served as the military force for the Council. They were ancient, powerful, and apparently made of some kind of living mineral that could think and feel. The insect creatures were the Vrex, who handled all the trade and business between different worlds. The cloud beings were called Nethari, and they managed communication across the galaxy using technology that humans barely understood. A voice filled the chamber, speaking in a language that sounded like music mixed with the rumble of distant thunder. Jake's translation device, a small computer attached to his ear, turned the alien words into English. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Morrison of the species called humans. You may present your statement." Jake stepped forward and activated his own translator, which would turn his English words into the galactic common language. He had practiced this speech hundreds of times, working with Earth's best diplomats and psychologists to create something that would show humanity in the best possible light. "Great beings of the Galactic Council," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "I speak for all humanity when I say we are honored to stand before you today. We come seeking friendship and the chance to learn from your wisdom." The translation systems throughout the chamber hummed quietly as they converted his words. Jake could see lights flickering on the alien platforms as the various species received his message in their own languages. "We humans are a young species," Jake continued, "but we are determined to protect our interests and the interests of our friends. We have never been a people to back down from a challenge, and we believe this strength will serve the galaxy well." Captain Harper frowned as she watched from above. Something seemed wrong with the way the aliens were reacting. Several of the Vrex were clicking their mandibles rapidly, which Dr. Collins had told her was either a sign of excitement or fear. The crystal Zephyrians were pulsing with brighter light, and the cloud beings were swirling faster in their tanks. Jake pressed on with his speech, unaware of the growing tension in the room. "Throughout our history, we humans have faced every obstacle with courage and determination. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that would have destroyed weaker species. We have never met a fight we wouldn't finish, and we have never abandoned our friends when they needed us." The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Alarms began blaring throughout the chamber, and emergency lights flashed in colors that hurt human eyes to look at. The Vrex began making sharp clicking sounds that the translators couldn't interpret. The Nathari started spinning so fast in their tanks that they looked like tornadoes. Most frightening of all, the giant Zephyrians began moving toward what looked like exit platforms, their crystal bodies ringing like enormous bells. "What's happening down there?" Captain Harper demanded, but Dr. Collins was already working frantically at her computer. "The translation systems," Amy said, her voice tight with panic. Something went wrong with the translation systems. Jake stood in the middle of the chaos, completely confused. His translator was now giving him fragments of alien speech that made no sense. Words like Warbringer and Species Killer and Death World Spawn filled his ear, but he couldn't understand why the aliens were saying such things. "Commander." Taylor activated his communicator. "All security teams prepare for emergency evacuation. Something has gone very wrong." The largest of the Zephyrians, a being whose crystal body rose nearly 30 feet into the air, approached Jake. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of breaking glass mixed with thunder. The translation came through clearly this time. "The Council has received your declaration of war against all galactic civilizations. We will inform our fleets immediately." "Declaration of war?" Jake shouted over the noise of alarms and fleeing aliens. "I never declared war on anyone. I was trying to make friends." But the Zephyrian was already moving away, along with most of the other aliens in the chamber. Within minutes, the vast room that had been full of representatives from dozens of worlds was nearly empty. Only a few small beings remained, huddled in corners and making sounds that the translators interpreted as prayers or pleas for mercy. Captain Harper was already giving orders to her crew. "Prepare the ship for immediate departure. Get our people out of there right now." As Jake was hurried out of the chamber by his security team, he could see through the windows that alien ships were leaving the station as fast as they could move. Some were so eager to escape that they didn't even wait for proper clearance from traffic control. Dr. Collins worked desperately at her computers as they rushed back to their ship. "I think I know what happened," she said. "Our translation software wasn't prepared for the cultural context. What we meant as expressions of determination and friendship got translated as declarations of military supremacy." "How bad is it?" Lisa asked as they reached the Explorer. Amy looked up from her computer screen, her face pale. "According to the linguistic analysis, we accidentally told the entire Galactic Council that humanity is a warrior species that has never lost a war and is looking for new enemies to fight. We essentially announced that we're the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, and we're ready to prove it." The Explorer pulled away from the station just as the last alien ships were fleeing into hyperspace. In less than an hour, Jake Morrison's attempt at peaceful first contact had become the opening move in what the galaxy believed was humanity's declaration of war against every civilized species among the stars. As they headed back toward Earth, none of them could have imagined that their translation errors would soon make humanity the most feared species in galactic history, or that this fear would ultimately lead to something none of them expected. General Pete Collins sat in his command chair deep inside Earth Defense Command, watching screens that showed more bad news every minute. 3 hours had passed since Ambassador Morrison's meeting with the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was going crazy. Red warning lights flashed across the main display as his staff tried to make sense of what they were seeing. "Sir, we're getting reports from all our deep space monitoring stations," said Lieutenant Jane Foster, her voice tight with worry. "Alien ships are fleeing human space as fast as they can travel. Some of them are broadcasting emergency signals." Pete rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the main screen. Dozens of alien vessels that had been peacefully trading with human colonies just hours ago were now running away like their lives depended on it. Ships that usually took days to prepare for departure were leaving so quickly they were breaking their own safety protocols. "Any word from our people at the Galactic Council station?" Pete asked. "Captain Harper's ship is on the way back, but they won't arrive for another 6 hours. All we know is that something went very wrong during the diplomatic meeting." Across, The command center, Dr. Helen Rodriguez, worked frantically at her computer station. Helen was Earth's top expert on alien psychology, and she had been trying to understand alien behavior patterns for years. Right now, she was analyzing every piece of communication they could intercept from the fleeing alien ships. "General Collins, you need to see this," Helen called out. "I've been studying the alien emergency broadcasts, and it's worse than we thought. They're not just running away from us. They're warning everyone in the galaxy about us." Pete walked over to Helen's station and looked at her screen. Lines of translated text scrolled past, showing messages between different alien species. The words made his stomach feel sick. "Look at this message from a Vrex trade ship," Helen said, pointing at the screen. "It says, 'The humans have revealed their true nature. They are the apex predator species we were warned about in the ancient records. All civilian vessels should avoid human territory immediately.'" "Apex predator species?" Pete asked. "What does that mean?" Helen pulled up another message, this one from a Nathari communication hub. This one is even worse. It says, "Human ambassador has formally challenged the entire Galactic Council to combat. Their species appears to have achieved spaceflight while retaining primitive, aggressive instincts. Recommend immediate military response." The command center fell quiet, except for the beeping of computers and the hum of air conditioning. Everyone was starting to understand that Ambassador Morrison's peaceful mission had somehow turned into the galaxy, thinking humanity was declaring war on everyone. "Sir," Lieutenant Foster called out from her station, "we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout the galaxy. Ships that haven't worked together in centuries are forming groups and heading toward neutral meeting points." Pete felt a cold chill run down his back. "Show me." The main screen changed to show a map of local space. Dots of different colors showed the positions of various alien fleets, and most of them were moving in patterns that looked very much like military formations preparing for war. "The Zephyrian Empire is mobilizing their entire Crystal Fleet," Foster reported. "The Vrex Trading Confederation is pulling all their ships back to their home systems. Even the Nethari, who never get involved in conflicts, are forming defensive groups around their communication networks." Meanwhile, 8 light-years away from Earth, Captain Steve Johnson was having the worst day of his career. His cargo ship, the New Frontier, was carrying medical supplies to a human colony when everything went wrong. Steve was a civilian trader who had never fired a weapon in his life, but that was about to change. "Captain, we've got alien ships approaching," said Maya Foster, his engineer. Maya was Steve's cousin and had been working on cargo ships for 10 years. She had never seen aliens act like this before. "Are they responding to our communication attempts?" Steve asked. Paul Wright, the ship's navigator, shook his head. "Nothing, Captain. They're not even acknowledging our presence, but their weapons are powered up and their shields are active." Steve looked out the front window of his ship and saw 3 Vrex fighters approaching fast. The insect-like ships were sleek and dangerous-looking, with weapon ports that were glowing with energy. Under normal circumstances, Vrex traders were peaceful and friendly. These ships looked ready for a fight. "This is Captain Johnson of the Earth vessel New Frontier," Steve broadcast on all communication channels. "We are a civilian cargo ship carrying medical supplies. Please respond." The Vrex ships opened fire without warning. "Shields up," Steve shouted, but Maya was already activating their defensive systems. The New Frontier wasn't a military ship, but all human vessels carried basic defensive equipment because space could be dangerous. Energy beams struck their shields, making the whole ship shake. Warning alarms filled the bridge as their defensive computers tried to figure out how to respond to the attack. "They're not trying to disable us," Paul said, reading his instruments. "Those are killing shots. They want to destroy us." Steve had to make a decision no civilian captain should ever have to make. The New Frontier's automated defense system was asking for permission to return fire. Steve had always hoped he would never have to use weapons against another living being, but the Vrex ships were trying to kill his crew. "Authorize defensive fire," Steve said quietly. The New Frontier's defensive lasers activated automatically, targeting the attacking ships. With computer precision, human defensive systems were designed to be simple and effective, built by people who understood that sometimes you had to fight to survive. The first Vrex fighter exploded in a ball of fire and metal. The The second one lost its engine and started spinning out of control. The third ship immediately stopped firing and fled as fast as it could travel. Steve sat in his captain's chair, staring at the wreckage of the Vrex ship floating in space. He had just killed people, and he didn't even understand why they had attacked him. "Captain," Maya said softly, "our automatic systems recorded the entire fight. The ship's computer will send that recording to Earth Defense Command. And to anyone else who was monitoring our communications," Paul added, "including other alien ships in the area." What Steve didn't know was that his ship's defensive actions were being broadcast across galactic communication networks within minutes. To alien species who had never seen human military technology in action, the fact that a simple cargo ship could destroy military fighters confirmed their worst fears about human capabilities. Back on Earth, President Karen Bell was meeting with her top advisors in the White House Situation Room. Admiral Roy Carter, the head of Earth's Space Navy, was showing her intelligence reports that painted a frightening picture of what was happening in the galaxy. "Madam President, we're seeing military preparations on a scale that hasn't happened in galactic history," Admiral Carter said. "Species that have been enemies for thousands of years are suddenly working together, and they all seem to be preparing for war with us." Dr. Nina Torres, Earth's top scientist, was working on a different problem. She was trying to figure out how to fix the translation errors that had started this mess. "The problem is that our translation software didn't understand the cultural context of what Ambassador Morrison was saying," she explained. "Human expressions about strength and determination got translated as threats and declarations of war. Can we send a message explaining the mistake?" President Bell asked. "We've tried," Nina said. "But no one is listening to us anymore. They think any communication from us is part of our psychological warfare strategy." The situation got worse. When reports came in about Captain Johnson's fight with the Vrex ships, what humans saw as a defensive action against an unprovoked attack, the galaxy interpreted as proof that even human civilian vessels were heavily armed and ready for combat. "They think we're all warriors," Admiral Carter said grimly. "Every human, from our diplomats to our cargo ship captains, is being seen as a potential military threat." General Collins received one final piece of bad news that day. Long-range sensors detected that over 40 alien species had begun moving, their fleets toward the edges of human space. They weren't attacking yet, but they were getting ready for what they believed would be the biggest war in galactic history. As night fell on Earth, humanity faced a crisis unlike anything in their history. They had wanted to join the galactic community as friends and partners. Instead, through a series of translation errors and misunderstandings, they had accidentally convinced the entire galaxy that humans were dangerous predators looking for a fight. The galaxy was preparing for war against Earth, and humanity didn't even understand why. Deep in the crystal city of Zeth Prime, the most important meeting in galactic history was taking place. Keth Vo, the Zephyrian Empire's chief scientist, stood before a gathering of military leaders from across the galaxy. His crystal body pulsed with nervous light as he prepared to share the most disturbing research report he had ever written. "Fellow beings," Keth Vo began, his voice ringing like distant bells. "After studying the humans for 72 hours, I must report that we are facing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans are not like any species we have ever encountered." The assembled military leaders listened with growing alarm as Keth Vo activated a holographic display showing Earth. The planet looked beautiful from space, blue and green and covered with white clouds, but as the display zoomed in, it revealed details that shocked the alien observers. "The human homeworld is classified as a Death World Category 7, Keth Vo explained. "It has weather systems that can destroy cities, temperatures that range from deadly cold to deadly heat, and gravity that is nearly twice the standard for inhabited worlds. Yet somehow, humans not only survived on this world, they thrived." A Vrex commander, her insect wings buzzing with anxiety, spoke up. "How is this possible? Our homeworld has stable weather, comfortable temperatures, and gravity that allows us to fly. We cannot imagine living in such conditions." Keth Vo's crystal body grew brighter as he displayed more information. "That is not the worst part. Humans evolved as what they call persistence hunters. They would chase their prey across vast distances until the other creatures died from exhaustion. They are literally designed to hunt down and kill anything that runs from them. The room fell silent except for the sound of various aliens breathing, clicking or humming in distress. The idea of a species that had evolved to hunt down fleeing creatures was terrifying to beings who had evolved as peaceful herbivores or filter feeders. Meanwhile, Commander Drew Phillips of the UES Defender was about to make the situation even worse without meaning to. His patrol ship was conducting routine exercises near the edge of human space when they detected an alien vessel watching them from a distance. "Captain, we have an Athari research ship maintaining position about 10,000 kilometers away," reported Lieutenant Carol Martinez, the ship's sensor operator. "They appear to be observing our training exercises." Drew looked at the main screen and saw the cloud-like beings floating in their transparent ship. The Nathari were known for being curious about other species, so their presence wasn't unusual. What Drew didn't know was that they were documenting human military capabilities for the Galactic Defense Alliance. "Let's give them something interesting to watch," Drew said with a smile. "Continue with Combat Scenario 7. Dr. Julie Adams, the ship's science officer, was a bit concerned. "Sir, shouldn't we try to communicate with them first? They might think we're preparing to attack someone." "They're scientists," Drew replied. "They'll understand that we're just training." What followed was a demonstration that convinced the Galaxy that humans were even more dangerous than they had feared. The Defender's crew began practicing combat maneuvers in conditions that would kill most alien species. They simulated fighting while their ship was damaged, with artificial gravity turned off, and with life support systems failing. The Nathari researchers watched in growing horror as humans calmly performed complex military operations while floating in zero gravity, wearing bulky protective suits and breathing recycled air. What humans considered normal safety training looked like preparation for warfare in impossible conditions. Dr. Julie Adams tried to establish communication with the Nathari ship, hoping to explain what they were doing. When contact was established, she found herself talking to a being that called itself Flowing Thought of Distant Stars. "Greetings, peaceful beings," Julie said through the translation system. "We are conducting routine training exercises. We hope our activities are not disturbing your research." The response from Flowing Thought was filled with confusion and fear. "Your species practices combat scenarios in conditions that would kill our warriors within minutes. How do you breathe when your air systems fail? How do you fight when gravity disappears? How do you function when your ship is damaged?" Julie realized that the aliens didn't understand that humans had to train for emergency situations because their ships sometimes broke down or got damaged. To species whose technology never failed and whose ships were built to never have problems, human emergency training looked like preparation for impossible battles. "We practice these scenarios because sometimes things go wrong," Julie explained. "Our equipment isn't perfect, so we need to know how to survive when it fails." This explanation made things worse. To the Nathari, the idea that humans built imperfect technology and then trained to fight with broken equipment was proof that they were a warrior species that preferred combat over safety. Back on Earth, Dr. Tony Clark was trying to understand why the galaxy was so afraid of humanity. Tony was a psychologist who studied how different species thought and behaved. He had been analyzing alien communications and cultural records, trying to figure out what made humans seem so threatening. "I think I found the answer," Tony told his research team during their daily meeting. "Every other species in the galaxy achieved peace among their own kind before they developed space travel. They solved all their conflicts and learned to work together before they built starships." Dr. Lisa Wong, Tony's research partner, looked confused. "That sounds like a good thing. Why does that make them afraid of us?" "Because we didn't do that," Tony explained. "We reached the stars while we were still competitive, still aggressive, still willing to fight. To them, we look like a species that achieved advanced technology while keeping our primitive instincts." The research team began to understand the scope of the problem. Human qualities that humans considered normal looked terrifying to species that had evolved beyond conflict. Things like competitive sports, military training, and even children's playground games were being interpreted as evidence of human aggression. "Look," At this analysis of human entertainment, said Dr. Mark Johnson, another member of the team, he showed them alien reports on human movies, sports, and video games. They think our action movies are historical documents. They believe our boxing matches are military training. They think our video games are combat simulators. The situation became clearer when they analyzed how other species had developed. Most galactic civilizations had evolved on worlds with abundant resources and stable climates. They had achieved intelligence through cooperation with their environment, not by conquering it. The idea of a species that had fought its way to the top of a hostile food chain was completely foreign to them. They see us as apex predators, Tony concluded. Every other species in the galaxy evolved as prey animals or peaceful herbivores. We're the first predator species they've ever met that achieved space travel. This revelation explained why human diplomatic language had been so badly misunderstood. When Ambassador Morrison talked about humans never backing down from a challenge, species that had never faced challenges heard it as a threat. When he mentioned that humans had survived wars and disasters, peaceful species heard it as bragging about violence. The galaxy's fear wasn't entirely unreasonable from their perspective. Humans did things that other species found impossible to understand. Humans competed against each other for fun. They practiced fighting as entertainment. They told stories about violence and conflict. They trained their children to be strong and competitive. What humans saw as normal development, the galaxy saw as the behavior patterns of a dangerous predator species that had somehow learned to build spaceships. The research team realized that explaining human nature to the galaxy would be almost impossible. How do you convince herbivore species that predators can be peaceful? How do you explain to beings who had never experienced conflict that competition doesn't always mean war? As reports continued to come in from across the galaxy, it became clear that every human activity was being analyzed as potential military intelligence. Human sports stadiums were being studied as warrior training facilities. Human schools were being examined as combat academies. Even human hospitals were being investigated as repair centers for battle-damaged soldiers. The galaxy wasn't just afraid of human military power, they were terrified of human nature itself. Captain Linda Murphy stared at her computer screen in complete shock. Her science vessel, the UES Discovery, had been monitoring galactic communications for the past week, and what they were hearing made no sense at all. Linda was a career scientist who had spent 15 years studying space, but nothing had prepared her for this. Dr. Rodriguez, you need to look at this immediately, Linda called to her chief science officer. Sam Rodriguez was the best language expert in the human fleet, and he had been working around the clock to translate the flood of alien messages they were intercepting. Sam hurried over to Linda's station, his face pale from lack of sleep. What did you find, Captain? It's a Zephyrian military report, Linda said, pointing at the translated text on her screen. They're talking about something they call Operation Survival Protocol. Look at what they're saying about us. Sam read the translated report out loud, his voice getting quieter with each sentence. Human civilian population demonstrates military discipline comparable to our elite Crystal Guard units. Human children undergo combat training disguised as recreational activities. Human medical facilities appear designed to repair battle damage rather than treat natural illness. Linda felt sick to her stomach. They think our playgrounds are military training camps? It gets worse, Sam said, scrolling through more reports. Here's one from the Vrex Trade Council. They've analyzed video footage of a human marathon race and classified it as documentation of human endurance capabilities that exceed all known galactic military standards. Across the ship, Dr. Grace Williams was making an even more disturbing discovery. Grace was a military analyst who specialized in understanding enemy tactics, but now she was trying to understand how the galaxy saw human tactics. What she found made her wish she had chosen a different career. Captain Murphy, Grace called from her workstation. I've been analyzing Zephyrian weapons development reports, and they're building new weapons specifically designed to fight humans. Linda and Sam rushed over to Grace's station. What kind of weapons? Linda asked. Grace pulled up technical diagrams that showed crystalline devices unlike anything humans had ever seen. They're designing weapons based on their analysis of human entertainment media. They think our movies and television shows are historical military records. You mean they think science fiction movies are real? Sam asked. Worse than that, Grace replied. They've been studying films about human soldiers and they think those movies show standard human military capabilities. They're building weapons to counter tactics they saw in action movies. The three officers stood in silence, trying to understand the magnitude of the misunderstanding. The galaxy's most advanced military forces were preparing to fight enemies that existed only in Hollywood movies. Meanwhile, on the outer colony world of New Haven, Governor Matt Johnson was dealing with a crisis he never could have imagined. A small group of alien refugees had arrived at his colony in a damaged ship, begging for protection from what they called the coming galactic war. Governor Johnson, said Dr. Beth Carter, the colony's chief medical officer, you need to meet these refugees. What they're telling us about galactic preparations is unbelievable. Matt followed Beth to the medical center, where he found 3 alien beings huddled together in obvious fear. One was a small Vrex, about the size of a human child, whose insect wings were torn and damaged. Another was a Nathari, floating in a portable tank because the colony didn't have proper life support for gas-based beings. The third was something Matt had never seen before, a furry creature with 6 legs and large frightened eyes. The Vrex, whose name translated to chittering in the void, spoke first. Please, human governor, we seek sanctuary from the war that is coming. We do not wish to fight your species. There isn't going to be a war, Matt said gently. This is all a misunderstanding. Humans are peaceful. We don't want to fight anyone. Chittering in the void made a sound that the translator interpreted as bitter laughter. You say you are peaceful, but our military analysts have studied your species for days. We know what you are. Dr. Carter sat down next to the frightened aliens. What do you think we are? The Nathari, calling itself Whisper of Distant Storms, answered by projecting images into the air using its natural abilities. The images showed human activities, but seen through alien eyes they looked completely different than what they actually were. Your species practices warfare while calling it entertainment, Whisper of Distant Storms explained. You have facilities where your people fight each other with their bare hands while others watch and cheer. You call this boxing and wrestling, but we know it is combat training. Matt realized they were talking about sports. Those are games, he explained. People compete for fun, not to hurt each other. Games? The furry 6-legged alien, whose name meant something like soft fur running fast, seemed confused. Your games involve violence and competition. Our games involve cooperation and sharing. We do not understand how violence can be entertaining. Dr. Carter tried a different approach. What else have you learned about humans that frightens you? Chittering in the void activated a small device that projected more images. These showed human military training, construction work, and even children playing on playground equipment. But the alien commentary made everything sound terrifying. Your warriors trained to fight in conditions that would kill our soldiers instantly, the Vrex explained. They practice combat while wearing heavy protective gear, in environments with no air, and while their equipment is damaged. Your construction workers build structures in conditions that our people could not survive. Even your young offspring demonstrate physical capabilities that exceed our adult warriors. Matt began to understand the scope of the problem. Everything humans did looked impossibly dangerous to species that had evolved on safe, comfortable worlds. Human children climbing on playground equipment looked like military training to beings whose children never faced any physical challenges. But, why did you come here? Matt asked. If you're so afraid of humans, why did you flee to a human colony? Soft Fur Running Fast made a sound that might have been crying. Because we studied your laws and customs. You have something called the Geneva Convention, rules for how to conduct war. We do not understand how a species can be so violent, yet also have rules about being kind to enemies. This revelation shocked both Matt and Dr. Carter. The aliens had discovered that humans had created ethical frameworks for warfare, something that was completely impossible for species that had never experienced conflict. You have warriors who risk their lives to save enemies who are wounded in battle, Whisper of Distant Storms explained. You have laws that protect civilians during conflicts. You have treaties that limit what weapons can be used. We do not understand how predators can show mercy. Dr. Carter realized that these aliens had found something in human nature that gave them hope. They were terrified of human capabilities, but they were amazed by human morality. Our species never developed such concepts because we never needed them, Chittering in the Void explained. We achieved peace before we developed advanced technology. But you achieved advanced technology while remaining capable of war. Yet you still chose to limit your own violence. This is unprecedented in galactic history. The conversation was interrupted when Governor Johnson received an emergency communication from Earth. The message was brief but alarming. Galactic military preparations were accelerating, and over 60 species had now joined what they were calling the Anti-Human Defense Alliance. Back on the Discovery, Captain Murphy received the final piece of information that revealed just how badly the situation had deteriorated. A communication from a Zephyrian science vessel contained detailed analysis of human psychological profiles based on intercepted Earth entertainment broadcasts. They've been studying our television shows, our sports, our news reports, and our social media, Dr. Rodriguez reported. They think everything they see represents normal human behavior. What conclusions did they reach? Captain Murphy asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Sam read from the report with a grim expression. They believe humans are a species that has somehow maintained predatory instincts while developing advanced technology. They think we view conflict as entertainment, competition as a way of life, and violence as a normal solution to problems. They're convinced that we're the galaxy's first true warrior species, and they're terrified that we're coming for them next. The irony was overwhelming. Humanity had spent decades preparing for peaceful first contact with alien civilizations. They had created detailed protocols for diplomatic meetings, cultural exchange programs, and scientific cooperation. Instead, through a series of translation errors and cultural misunderstandings, they had accidentally convinced the galaxy that humans were the most dangerous species in the universe. The galaxy was preparing for war against Earth, and humanity was only just beginning to understand why. Dr. Claire Patterson walked into the emergency meeting room at Earth Defense Command with a crazy idea that might save the galaxy from war. Claire had spent 30 years studying how different groups of people solved their problems, and she had been thinking about the alien crisis in a completely different way than everyone else. General Collins, Claire said as she took her seat at the conference table, I think we've been approaching this problem all wrong. Instead of trying to convince the galaxy that we're not dangerous, we should show them how we use our dangerous nature to protect others. General Pete Collins looked tired and stressed. His gray hair was messy from running his hands through it, and his uniform was wrinkled from 3 days of emergency meetings. Dr. Patterson, with respect, the galaxy thinks we're monsters. How exactly do we convince them we're friendly monsters? Claire opened her laptop and showed a presentation she had been working on all night. Every species in the galaxy evolved as prey animals. They've never seen predators who learn to control their instincts. We need to demonstrate that human aggression isn't about conquest. It's about protection. Admiral Roy Carter, who was sitting across the table, shook his head. They won't listen to our explanations. They think anything we say is psychological warfare. Then we don't explain, Claire said with a smile. We show them. 2 days later, Captain Jim Morris of the UES Peacekeeper was leading the most important mission in human history. His ship was approaching Harmony Station, a neutral meeting place where representatives from 43 alien species were coordinating their defense against what they believed was the coming human invasion. Captain, we're being tracked by at least 12 different alien warships, reported Lieutenant Kevin Adams from the sensor station. They're not shooting at us yet, but their weapons are charged and ready. Captain Morris was a career military officer who had served in 3 different conflicts on Earth, but he had never been in a situation like this before. His mission was to approach a station full of aliens who thought he was there to kill them, and somehow convince them that humans were actually peaceful. Dr. Sullivan, are you ready for this? Jim asked his passenger. Dr. Kate Sullivan was Earth's best expert at solving conflicts between angry groups. She had helped end civil wars, negotiate peace treaties, and mediate disputes between countries. Now she was trying to prevent a war between her entire species and the rest of the galaxy. As ready as anyone can be for the impossible, Kate replied. Just remember, Captain, we're not here to fight. No matter what happens, we have to show them that humans can choose not to fight. Major Dan Foster, the ship's security chief, was having a hard time with that order. Dan was a soldier who had been trained to protect his people, and flying into a hostile situation without being ready to fight went against every instinct he had. Captain, Dan said quietly, if they start shooting at us, my job is to keep this crew alive. I understand, Major, Jim replied, but if we fire back, we prove everything they believe about us. We have to find another way. The Peacekeeper was still 3 hours away from Harmony Station when everything changed. Long-range sensors detected a massive object on a collision course with a Zephyrian mining facility. The object was an asteroid the size of a mountain, and it was moving fast enough to destroy everything in its path. Captain, that asteroid is going to hit the mining station in 47 minutes, reported Chief Engineer Sarah Blake. There are over 3,000 Zephyrian workers on that facility, and their evacuation ships can't carry everyone in time. Jim looked at the tactical display and saw alien warships scattered around the area. The ships were all from different species, and they were all pointing their weapons at his ship instead of dealing with the asteroid crisis. Sir, Lieutenant Adams said, the alien ships are maintaining their defensive positions. They're not moving to help with the evacuation. Dr. Sullivan realized what was happening. They think the asteroid is a human weapon. They believe we're attacking the mining station as our opening move in the war. Captain Morris made a decision that would change galactic history. All ships, this is Captain Morris of the UES Peacekeeper. We are moving to intercept the asteroid. We will not allow civilian casualties on our watch. Sir, Major Foster said, if we move toward that facility, every alien ship in the area will assume we're attacking. Then we'll have to be very convincing about our intentions, Jim replied. Dr. Sullivan, I need you to broadcast on all frequencies. Make it clear that we're trying to save lives, not take them. The Peacekeeper changed course and headed directly toward the asteroid. As they moved, Kate Sullivan began broadcasting on every communication channel she could find. This is Dr. Kate Sullivan of the Earth vessel Peacekeeper. We are not attacking the mining facility. We are attempting to destroy the asteroid before it can cause casualties. We are here to save lives, not to take them. The alien ships didn't know what to think. They had been expecting humans to attack with overwhelming force and advanced weapons. Instead, they were watching a single human ship flying directly into danger to save people they had never met. Captain, we have 14 minutes to destroy that asteroid, reported Sarah Blake. But if we use our main weapons, the explosion will damage the mining station. Jim studied the tactical display and saw the problem. The asteroid was too close to the station to destroy safely with conventional weapons. They would need to use precise controlled explosions to break it into smaller pieces that would miss the facility. Major Foster, I need you to take a team in our shuttle and plant explosive charges directly on the asteroid. You'll have to time the explosions perfectly to break it apart without creating debris that will hit the station. Dan Foster looked at his captain with respect and fear. Sir, that's a suicide mission. The radiation from the asteroid's core will kill anyone who gets that close. Not if you work fast enough, Jim said, and not if you're willing to risk your life to save 3,000 strangers. Major Foster gathered his team of volunteers and prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. As their shuttle approached the asteroid, alien observers throughout the system watched in amazement. The humans weren't just risking their lives to save enemies. They were doing it while those same enemies pointed weapons at them. The shuttle landed on the asteroid with only 8 minutes remaining before impact. Foster's team worked with desperate speed, placing explosive charges in precise locations while their shuttle's sensors warned them about lethal radiation levels. Charges are set, Foster reported. We're clear and ready for detonation. Detonate, Captain Morris ordered. The asteroid exploded in a carefully controlled series of blasts that broke it into hundreds of smaller pieces. The debris scattered in all directions, but none of the fragments were large enough to seriously damage the mining station. 3,000 Zephyrian workers were saved by humans who had risked their lives for people who considered them enemies. The reaction throughout the galaxy was immediate and profound. For the first time in galactic history, a predator species had used its power to protect prey species rather than hunt them. Within hours, Ambassador Morrison received a message from the Galactic Council requesting a new meeting. This time, however, the message was very different. The Council wanted to understand how a species could be both dangerous and protective at the same time. Dr. Patterson's plan had worked. Instead of trying to convince the galaxy that humans weren't dangerous, the Peacekeeper's crew had demonstrated that human danger could be directed toward protecting others. The second diplomatic meeting went very differently than the first. When Ambassador Morrison stood before the Galactic Council again, the alien representatives listened with new respect and curiosity, rather than fear. "We have observed your species' actions at the mining facility," said the Zephyrian Prime Speaker. "We do not understand how predators can choose to protect those who fear them." Morrison smiled and gave a much shorter speech than his first attempt. "We protect others because we know what it means to be afraid. We know what it means to face danger, and we know that the strong have a responsibility to help the weak." Dr. Patterson, who was standing beside Morrison, added her own explanation. "Human aggression isn't about hurting others. It's about standing between those we care about and the things that threaten them. We learned long ago that the best way to use our strength is to protect those who can't protect themselves." The galaxy began to understand that they had discovered something unprecedented, a species that had evolved as predators but had chosen to become guardians. The Galactic Council established the Human Integration Protocol, a program that allowed humanity to join galactic civilization in a special role. Humans became the galaxy's emergency response specialists, the people others called when facing dangers that required courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to fight against impossible odds. Years later, Ambassador Morrison would often joke that humanity had become the galaxy's protectors by accidentally threatening to fight everyone. The translation error that had nearly started an interstellar war had instead revealed that the galaxy needed a species brave enough and tough enough to stand guard against the dangers lurking in the dark spaces between stars.